tradition, but many years. Yes. They used to help run those here. Like not. Yes, we have a whole lot of time. Second hand, there's someone, but it's not.
Just like, here's what's going on. Just like,
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Runs, no way.
I know.
What you doing? Yeah. Oh, then he's in. Good job.
I know, it's like, this stuff. So it's get through Wednesday, but I so like Thursday, I'll just. But anyway, just, I think we'll be good with getting through two, it gets in Sterling.
Okay,
So there's a bit of a drive and then it's just there and then back.
great.
But,
All right.
just if anything, like, we're too far off, like, hey, let me go now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, so you want.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks.
That's very exciting. Wow, are we all back? Kind of? No. Wait for Tara. You're like uncharacteristically suddenly quiet. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started so we got a super packed agenda today, so we will try not to get behind too much. And did you decide?
Yeah.
Okay, so we just heard about kind of the public recreation side. Now we're gonna hear more about the private recreation side of water. So we've got, our first speaker is Matt Reddy. He's a regional biologist with Ducks Unlimited. And he's worked on wetland and waterfowl conservation in Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and the Dakotas for over 30 years. As a regional biologist, he's responsible for the development, funding, and implementation of conservation programs and projects that restore and protect important waterfowl habitats throughout Colorado and our neighboring states. I'm gonna skip ahead. He's working closely on understanding how the physical and administration distribution of water in our basins impacts habitat quality, the life cycle success of targeted wildlife species, and availability of high-quality recreation sites for millions of Colorado citizens. So go ahead, Matt. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's good to be back to talk about private recreation and water use in Colorado. Here's kind of the layout of what I'm trying to do for you folks. Is talk about water use in terms of especially our prior appropriation system, a little bit on non-consumptive use of water and how that impacts our ability to recreate, and then get really heavily into direct diversions within the prior appropriation system and this concept of ancillary use, which is really how we get what we want done out on the landscape. And ancillary use is basically the foundation for a lot of the collaborative water work we do with folks like you across the basin and the state. I have to do that in 15 minutes. It's going to be really difficult because it means I have to talk fast, which I'm not good at. And it means I have to gloss over a lot of details when it comes to water, which I worse at doing that. But hopefully this talk and the next talk we can pull together and then have some really fine discussion if there are details of one of them we can talk about then. A little bit about more about my biography. I live here in Fort Collins with my family. My wife Jody actually works here at the Community Foundation. My son Gus goes to Lesher Middle School here in Fort Collins, and my daughter Phoebe goes to Laurel Elementary. As was said, I've been a biologist doing waterfowl work in Colorado and places around us for many, many years. But it's kind of funny. I started off being a terrestrial biologist. That's me as a kid doing kit fox work in the deserts of Colorado. And one of the reasons I became who I am right now, talking about water, is I think they just saw that I'm from South Dakota, which is where a lot of ducks come from. And I moved here when I was about 13 years old. I moved to Greeley with my family. And I think they just assumed that somebody from South Dakota knew a lot about ducks and water. And so I just fell into this job. But that journey from understanding how water works in a place that has a lot of water in Northeast and South Dakota to come into a place like Colorado where water is absolutely regulated. It was a shock for me as a kid to come here and say, hey, I'm just gonna go out and hunt some ducks, but you can't do that here in Colorado. There's private water. Private water is privately owned. That just blew my mind, so much so that I often just went back to South Dakota to recreate. But we figured it out, and a little bit of what I'm gonna talk about today shows you how not just Ducks Unlimited, but recreational organizations generally have figured this out. This slide is a lot of text, I'm sorry. I tried to figure out how to do this kind of philosophical legal stuff in a cool picture or a chart, but it just doesn't work very well. The takeaway from it though is, as you guys probably learned, water distribution administration in Colorado works under the prior appropriation system, which means it's a right, it's a use of property right. That means you have to put it to use. And the people who are putting it to use are people. Ducks, fish, streams, forests, they can't put water to beneficial use. And so these are the places and the things that we use to recreate. So they kind of sit outside and they don't sit easily within that system that we developed to distribute water here in the state, which means you have to take water out of a stream or a lake, put it to use, and then you have that right. And that right is very much, hierarchical right. The first person to do that, they're trying to really use that water. So the things we like to do, hunt, fish, swim, ski, didn't really sit well within that system of rights. But over time, we kind of modified those systems. We found spaces to use that rights system to make things work for the things we like to do. And recreation is really important to the people of Colorado. Not only is it an economic driver, but it really is about our identity, right? If you talk to Americans about what Colorado does, it's we're outside people. And so much of that outside stuff depends on it being wet and using water. So our laws and our statutes actually developed in the mid-20th century to start to recognize recreation, wildlife, fisheries, and those kind of recreation-oriented things as beneficial uses of Colorado's water. So I just want to be clear with that. So we can take water and put it to beneficial use in the prior appropriation system for duck ponds or for water skiing. But very few people do, and we'll get to that. I'll quantify that a little bit here later, with exceptions, but very, very few people do, and we'll talk about why that is. Beyond that, administration of these kind of rights is tricky. When the Division of Water Resources wants to look at whether somebody who's growing a bunch of corn in Weld County is wasting water, which is part of that beneficial use paradigm, it's pretty easy for them to do. They're saying, well, you're just putting way too much corn, it doesn't need that much water. But how are you wasting water when it's ducks that come and go? Or how much water does a water skier need? How much water do rafters need, right? Maybe that's a little bit more easy to quantify, but it's harder for people who are really come out of the ag sector to look at ways to think about, well, when you're designing wetlands and putting that water to beneficial use, what quantifies waste? And we actually get into some difficulties with the Division of Water Resources with that. But all that being said, we work hard to work with all the kinds of folks in this room and outside of this room to come up with solutions. And we'll walk through some of those solutions. But the first thing is just to take a step back, and we still can recreate using water outside of that prior appropriation system, non-consumptive use, which just means water that isn't diverted, isn't put it to beneficial use under some kind of adjudicated, decreed water rate. The classic photo of that is just a fly fisherman up in the lower streams, the natural flow, they're fishing, they're recreating, enjoying Colorado. But because it's not a decreed water right, again, it's outside of that administration system, these are not protected. And we've seen a lot of conflict arise because our natural streams are things that we really value, but they can be significantly impacted by somebody coming and diverting that water and putting it into that administrative system. So eventually one of the things we've done, and I'm not going to get into it because I'm sure others may, is we came up with the idea of in-stream flow rights and natural wave levels to protect those kind of non-consumptive use. they're an actual decree water right. They're kind of like this in-between thing where you're not taking that water and putting it to traditional beneficial use. You're keeping it in the stream or you're keeping the lake levels where they are. And they're part of that administrative system. And this is basically a map of Colorado to show you, these are where all the in-stream flow rights are. There's thousands of them. But again, look at the pattern of where that is. A lot of that is in the high country, which makes sense. That's where a lot of us like to go and enjoy natural streams. It's also where a lot of public land is. So a lot of these are located, not exclusively, but a lot of them are on public lands. And this is where all the other natural lake levels. So these just maintain a certain volume of water in natural lakes. Again, the pattern over and above everything is those are up high on public lands. There's whole trenches of the state where people still like to recreate, by the way, that do not enjoy these kind of protections. So what do we do then? Well, one thing to do is to step into that prior appropriation system and use consumptive waters, direct diversions for recreation purposes. And again, fisheries, wildlife, and recreation are adjudicated rights in Colorado. That's by law and by statute. But not many do that. So what this represents, it's hard to read, but this is the Colorado Division 1. And I took a look at all the water rights decreed in this division. So this includes us here in the South Platte River Basin. And what this is showing is the distribution of those water rights amongst beneficial uses, irrigation, municipal use, et cetera, et cetera. And what this first pie chart shows is nothing for you because the number of wildlife, recreation, and fisheries rights that exist are too small to even be as wide as that white line versus irrigation, municipal, and all the others. There's one in this whole basin, one recreation right adjudicated for recreation, and that's all actually on a duck club east of Greeley. There's about a dozen or so fisheries and wildlife rights as well. Now, I want to be clear, these are solely for those. There's plenty of rights, a lot more. I don't want to be so doomed that have irrigation and wildlife. Where the principal use could be irrigation or storage or municipal, but either through a change of use or in the original decree, they included a whole bunch. And most people who are getting new decrees are doing changes of uses. Now just put every use you can imagine in that decree because then allows a lot of flexibility. But this again shows, not even almost a third, a little more than a quarter incorporate those kind of rights within their decrees. What's good about those is if you do get that, like I just said, they're relatively broad use in terms of seasonality, depths, extents, those kind of things that go into what is waste and when can you use them. Then you turn them into wildlife rights. You kind of open them up. Irrigation rights are subject to, May through September, and then you have to turn them off and allow other types of rights to be used. So using wildlife rights can really help you out, especially if your management prescriptions, like for biologists, maintain that you have to do things year round and not just grow crops. But it comes with costs. And as we know here in this part of the world, water is really expensive. And folks that we work with, either public agencies or private landowners, often don't have the resources that municipalities, industry, others do to purchase water rights or go through the adjudication process to change their right. These are just the prices. I'm not gonna go through them. That just shows that water is really, really expensive and dump people can't afford that kind of water. It's expensive too, not just in terms of the cost of money to do it or to administrate it, but you do lose when you transfer water rights. You do lose a significant amount of water. So if you were getting 10 CFS right, but only 5 CFS of that was consumptive use, when you transfer that over, you're only able to get 5 CFS, and that's a tremendous loss in terms of the amount of water. Again, glossing a lot of details here as I fly through this. The other thing to consider is we're in a water-short basin. There isn't a lot of water out there to take. We can't just go out and say, well, we're building a duck pond. Let's just go get a new water right and build it. It'll be so junior compared to what this is showing is that under all these different economic and climate scenarios, there are still huge gaps in terms of water supply for municipal industrial. These gaps don't even show environmental recreation. They don't even play into the fact that we're, as a basin, working really hard to supply water for these big gaps for municipal and industrial and agriculture. So what do we do when there's not enough water and it's really expensive? Well, we get into this idea of ancillary use of water, whereas recreation, conservation uses are secondary or an ancillary benefit of already existing uses. And this is really easy to think about when we're putting state or municipal parks on storage reservoirs. Here, right around Fort Collins, really low, and almost all of our parks and stuff are around storage or augmentation reservoirs. You often see it with private ski clubs on storage reservoirs around here too. It's like they buy the recreation rights on top of the storage water. Another big topic we could talk a long time about is wildlife benefits of irrigated agriculture. There's just the use of water on the landscape creates habitats for a lot of species that are important economically for recreation. And we use that a lot here in my job. So these manifold benefits, again, I'm glossing over a lot of them, can lead to otherwise scarce opportunities for us to work within the system that we're given to provide habitat for species that people like to see when they recreate, or to use the species like waterfowl. And that in itself allows us to interact with folks like you, which leverages opportunities itself and can lead to large scale conservation collaborations, which I'm going to try and get into if I have enough time. So what does this look like? We have a good idea of what storage reservoirs and parks look like here. But further out east, where we do a lot of our work, this is what it looks like. This is a private hunting club out on the South Platte River near Fort Morgan. And what you're looking at is this complex of different water uses on the landscape. You have irrigated ag, which provides food for birds. Back here is Jackson Reservoir. It's a storage reservoir. There's a state park on this reservoir. It's heavily used recreationally. The South Platte River runs through it. And then the landowners developed a lot of wetlands within the riparian zone for waterfowl habitat and for waterfowl hunting. The thing again I want to show is there isn't a water right in that whole picture that was decreed solely for wildlife, fisheries, or recreation. It's all other uses, mainly agriculture. Skip forward. So to get to the case study, one of the things, another way Ducks Unlimited, we've done a lot of work working with water users and water suppliers, such that we really developed kind of a niche where we work with large water providers to do managed aquifer recharge up and down the South Platte River. This is one of those ways where we found water availability in an extremely water short system. And I'll explain what managed aquifer recharge is in a second. But the basis of this is down on the Platte River, you have these species that depend on the river that looks like that 100 years ago. The river no longer looks like that. The river looks like that. And that's a problem with the Endangered Species Act. The Platte River flows across state lines. And what that means is anytime anybody in our basin who uses Platte River water wants to develop more water, they're subject to consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Service under the Endangered Species Act, which can be a very onerous process. Anytime you're adding a new depletion to the river, you're going to get in trouble and you're going to have to go and find a way to replace that water. Well, the state decided it would be much easier to do that as a group, everybody get together and do that program rather than each individual person have to go through that process. And that's what these documents represent. Don't have time to get into it, but trust me, it's better to do it as one whole group than just one-on-one. Each one of you and who you represent have to go consult the Fish and Wildlife Service anytime you want to change water use. So again, this is our problem, Big River, Little River. So managed aquifer recharge is part of the state's plan as a group of water users to address those endangered species issues. And basically what we do is in the non-irrigation season, when there tends to be a lot more water in the river, you can take that water and pump it out of the alluvial aquifer up into wetland recharge basins that are moved out of that. These wetland recharge basins recharge, retime that water back to the river during the irrigation season when there's a deficit of water. And what we're interested in is that these recharge basins mimic very closely the hydrology and the habitat function of a lot of the wetlands that Colorado has lost over the past century. The shallow, ephemeral, flashy systems have a lot of food production in them, and we've lost most of those because they're easy to drain. And so by using water provided to us under this program to create these wetland basins, and we do this on both public and private lands up and down the river, we can provide habitat conservation for recreation purposes while addressing that bigger need of water development in the Platte River Basin. So these are the two parts of the Tamarack plan where Ducks Unlimited has been instrumental in delivering the wetland-based recharge basins. The rest of these are a mix of private and public augmentation ponds that we've done for municipalities, private corporations, state, et cetera, et cetera. And this is just Ducks Unlimited is basically an engineering firm for the waterfowl. I'm a biologist, but by far most of our staff are engineers, and we go in, we're a basically turnkey operation where we can go in, do the design, permitting, fundraising, et cetera, to get these things done. And this is a augmentation site that's part of the Tamarack plan outside of Julesburg, Colorado, on private lands. It's a private individual who likes to hunt ducks. But we came together, first of all, perpetually protected this ranch that we purchased. Then we developed these habitat ponds on there. And these ponds not only deliver water back to the river so that the endangered species in Nebraska are okay, but they also augment a bunch of agricultural pivots that were kind of caught in no man's land, and they didn't have any augmentation water to cover their pumping of this stuff. And so it's one of those things where a bunch of folks came together to solve a problem. And this is why we like it, because this is what bird response looks like on these ponds. And I'm supposed to talk about private recreation, and this is a private property, but we get this kind of response on public property too, so that everybody can enjoy it. And they're birds, so they fly between as well. This is just some, what is that? What it looks like. So that's kind of it. Flew through that. I wanted to be cognizant of time. The end of my conversation.
One or two, and then we'll go to the next presentation and have more time at the end.
Forgot how hot it is.
It's so fun.
No.
I need to crack our door again. Any questions?
I have just a quick question about the augmentation, like when you're filling those in the fall, kind of winter season, how long do those stay flooded? And does that work with the timing of the species and their needs?
It's a great question because I said they're similar, but it's not a perfect representation. The function you want is to get as much water as possible through the pond into the aquifer to cover more depletions in the river. Typical wetland basins have sealed, so you put a little bit of water in, it stays. These you constantly have to pump the water. And so they function a little bit differently, but luckily the augmentation season occurs when most of the waterfowl are moving through Colorado. Colorado does not breed a lot of ducks. Most of the ducks you see and other waterfowl species, apart from the Canada geese you can find everywhere, are bred up in Canada, the Dakotas. And so we'll get tens of thousands of birds for breeding here in the Platte Basin, but we get millions upon millions of birds coming out, and they tend to come right about now is when they'll start showing up, coming out of Mexico to go back to Canada. This is the augmentation season. It's the golden once a year dating season. And then when they come back down in the fall, is also the augmentation season. So they're not perfect simulations of those basins, but they do grow food. They provide these birds places to rest, and you can't build them up when most of the birds tend to be.
One question. If the avian flu that's been going around this year, how does that really affect, from the maintenance and the population of waterfowl?
So complicated. Not so much the operation of these. Waterfowl are highly susceptible to avian flu because they're a species, bird species that congregates in large flocks. And so almost every dock or goose you see has been exposed to avian flu. But these areas, the more you have on the landscape, the more of those birds are distributed about, and that helps kind of manage that in a small way. Really with disease, what happens is if you get, a lot of our storage reservoirs are big, shallow reservoirs, and if you get a lot of birds, if we get a really warm spring, that can heat up and you get avian cholera, which has mass die-offs. I mean, you get some mass bird die-offs with avian flu, but cholera, a bunch of birds coming in and land on one of these big shallow reservoirs like Latham, some of the other ones that don't really, you can get some pretty significant mortality events.
Matt, recognizing there's a lot of landowner in this room, people responsible for a substantial portfolio of waters. Is there ways that maybe this more municipal side of the world could support your mission? I mean, my mission and your mission is really a similar mission with natural areas and conservation. So are there ways that folks like us could work with you, or what do you see as being the place where we might have the most overlap?
I could spend hours talking about a couple of, one is we worked with lots of municipalities, especially with big water players, including Greeley, in the past, just through their water departments. The second thing is we have just initiated a new program trying to talk more about waterfowl conservation. I mean, look at me, I'm an old duck hunter, right? So many, there's not a lot of people understand what this is all about, ducks unlimited, duck hunting. But we do a lot of work in terms of supporting a lot of things that Coloradans really like. And what we're trying to do is we just initiated a program 2 years ago to try and engage municipalities more in their natural areas and their directly to their citizens to explain some of the stuff I just went over, so that they can start to get an idea that when you support not just Ducks Unlimited, but kind of conservation and these traditional uses and hunters and fishermen, it's not just these weird guys who like to hunt animals. It's really the basis of a lot of the work that they enjoy in terms of water supply, water quality, all these other things. And keep it short. But yeah, we'd love to engage that. We have people specifically designated for that. Just can contact us anytime. We'll come out and have a broad chat or look at a specific project.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna, you're gonna. Lindsay Modisette. So she is filling in very, very kindly for her husband Brad. And Brad is the owner of the Mountain Whitewater Paddlers Club. He's got, you could read the kind of life story of how he came to become a whitewater rafting guide, but now owns his own business. So she's going to tell us about their business and kind of some of the struggles as it relates to water administration on the Poudre River. Go ahead. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Lindsay. Let's see here. Let's get this going. So, we own Mountain Whitewater and Paddlers Pub. It's on Northwest Fort Collins. We're one of 5 permit holders for a commercial permit on this river. Poudre River is the most highly regulated commercial rafting river in the state of Colorado. We answer to everybody, or everybody has their piece of the pie. Super fun business. We get to see the very best of people. They're on vacation. They're excited about life. They're with their families. They're super scared. They're doing a bucket list thing that they've thought about their whole life. So basically we sell fun, which yay for us. Does not come without its challenges though. Water in Colorado is very tricky, especially on this river, which we'll build upon a lot of what Matt said. We work a lot on the same similar kind of things. So that's us, Mountain Whitewater. We do half day and full day and 2-day trips on the rivers, on the Poudre River. And we also do, we do commercial rafting. That's like 95% of our business, inflatable rafts. But we also do kayak construction, guided inflatable kayak trips. We do paddleboard trips, basically everything recreating on water. And we do a guide instruction class most years. And that's how we get our new guides, but a lot of our guides have come back for 15, 20, 25 years with us. It's pretty neat. We're very, very lucky that way. We're kind of, not normal that way. Usually people, it's a very seasonal career, so they move on. But we are pretty lucky. We have doctors and lawyers and stuff. They'll show up in their suits and ties and take that off, put on their guide stuff and guide a trip and then go back to their real job. So it's kind of fun. We added a paddlers club in 2010. So we started Mountain Water in 2000. We added the paddlers club in 2010, just mainly because we are like farmers, right? So we deal with, fires and floods and droughts and all that stuff. And since all of our main income for 70 families is on the water, right? So if there's a fire, if there's a flood, which there have been a lot of lately, we wanted something else for income, to help us get through those hard years. Cause water is pretty tricky, right? Let's see. Like I said before, whitewater rafting is a bucket list for a lot of people, and we are lucky that we get to be couriers of that kind of thing. They come to us, they're scared, you know, they thought about this their whole life. It's class 4. It's a significant, this river is one of the best in the state of Colorado. It's also very, very low volume and very technical. So, which means scary. There's class 4 rapids in there. So we train our guides enough that we take all abilities and ages rafting. Those ages change throughout the year because of high water versus low water. But it is, like Brett said, good, clean, old fashioned fun. That people can do together with their families, with their parents, with their grandchildren. It's really neat to kind of watch everybody interact with each other. They feel like they're doing something very, very big and epic for their lives, you know, and we are able to steer them through that. It's something that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So what does that do? It creates a love for nature and water and rivers in Colorado. So then what does that do? It creates a need to want to protect that. So we're kind of like a vessel to get through that. So I told you guys 5 companies are permitted on the Pooter. Those permits were handed out in 1982. So the only way to operate a commercial business on this river is through a existing permit. So you have to buy an existing permit in order to do that. So there's only one original owner still. And then we're the second oldest. And then we bought ours from Boulder Outdoor Center, back in 2000. And then the other 3 have kind of changed owners within the last 5-10 years. So we have, like I said, we have strict, we answer to everybody. So we can only take 120 people during the weekday. We can only take 100 people on the weekends. And once we hit those numbers, we have to turn people away, no matter what. So May and June, it's not super busy. July, we're full 2 weeks out, and that's it. We cannot go over that number. We get dinged. If we do have a glitch in our reservation system and we go over, we're only allowed to go over 3% a year. That's not very much. So we don't. And then we have a cap of 8,000. So, and every company has a different put in. So on this river especially, you really get that wilderness feeling. You don't see many other companies. The staggered put in times, you might pass by them once in a while at the very end of the takeout, but for the most part, you're going to have a wilderness experience. As opposed to, like, you think the Arkansas River, we have 32,000 raft guests per year total throughout all the companies. The Arkansas River has 374,000. So for the same mileage of river. So that is significant. So CAPS and agencies that are protecting it, Department, Colorado State Parks, USDA, they all keep it a beautiful, wonderful, wild river. So the economic impact of rafting companies, there was a study done between 2006 and 2010. And, we started doing packages then, so we packaged with, paddles and saddles, we go horseback riding, we go ATVing, we'll have paddleboarding, they can go on a beer tour afterwards, we do all these different packages, and what we found was dining out for our customers went from 14% from coming just from Estes Park, coming to us, going rafting, went straight back to Estes Park. It increased from 14 to 50%. So they stayed here, spent their money here, started staying over here. Hotel stays went from 0 nights, they didn't stay here at all, to 3 nights, and it's actually increased more since then. It's actually around 7 nights now. People come and do less time in Estes Park and more time in Fort Collins specifically. And then the shopping went from 2 to 42% within local downtown companies. Public resource, anybody can go up and use, the Poudre Canyon. Our fees for when a rafting guest comes down is 3%. So every single person that goes down, we pay an additional 3% on them. And that's why, like, you get the vault toilets up there, and you get these areas that are cleaned up, and a lot of the rafting company, well, one other rafting company and us, we have like a stretch that we clean up 4 times a year, just to maintain the beauty of that resource so the public can enjoy it. So there's no caps, there's no permitting or anything for private use. So if you want to go up and you want to go kayaking every single day, you're more than welcome to, and we have to go around you. You can use any of the put-ins, you can put on in the river, in the canyon, anywhere you want, pretty much. We only have set places, and there's like 3 set places for us. And so it's hard when you get up there and there's on a Sunday and there's people fishing all over the place at our put-ins, which is the only commercial put-in. But, so we just have to navigate that, like, because it's their public land, right? They're paying for it. But it's the only place we can put in. So it's, kind of get into some gingerly like, hey, we're going to be here with 50 people. We'll be out of your way as soon as we can. But yeah, exactly. So, and then we gently, we try to be very, very nice and understanding, because we're all fishermen, we're all rafters, we're all kayakers or whatever. But it is a public resource that is supplemented by whatever fees we have for as a commercial rafting company. So Castle Poudre River, Colorado's only wild and scenic river. You've probably heard that a lot. I say it 1,000 times per year. That is a really, really neat thing, and it means something to people. 4 dams on side streams that bring water downstream in July and August. So this is like the biggest thing that people don't understand. So we are literally just surfing the river down. Like, we have no stake in it. We have no ability to tell people to send water down or anything. We are literally just farmers hoping for the rain without the ability to have irrigation. So we hope for rains in June. We want it to rain because then that supplements the reservoirs up high, because that's what we raft on in August. If we didn't have those reservoirs up high and the farmers calling for it out on the Eastern Plains, our season would be over July 22nd. And the bulk of our season is July 1st through August 20th. That's when we take the bulk of our people. So as you can imagine, that would cut our business in half. So every year is different. I don't think in 25 years we've had the same sort of year. But when it is a drought like last year was a pretty good sized drought in July. So we had late August levels in July, and then it never rained in the mountains, so it didn't replenish that. But it also didn't rain on the Eastern Plains in August, so they had to send whatever water they had down for the farmers. So we actually had we had July levels in August last year and August levels in July. It was all flip-flopped, and let me tell you how you can convince the guides to do low water in July. It's really hard. Like, easier in August, but in July, low water is hard to convince the guys to be excited every day to go. But yeah, we are very dependent on what the farmers need and want, and what happens, like the snowpack. Right now, we're very closely watching the snowpack. We're at about 103%, I think, was the last thing I saw in Snowtel. December, January, it doesn't matter at all. So when it doesn't snow in December and everybody's like, you guys must be freaking out for next year. I mean, we're like, no, I'm not even looking at it. I want to think about it, nothing. What we need to look at is when it starts to get into March and April. If we aren't getting those snows and we're not getting that snowpack. And the snowpack is what we wrapped on in June. That's what it looks like in June. Just much higher water, longer flows. We have longer trips, more mileage. And then as the water decreases and they start to use irrigation water, that's what we use in July and August, and we go further down the canyon because it gets more channelized and it's a little more technical. So things that we worry about year-round: drought, fire, landslides, tornado, flood, governmental permits. So like this year, you know, that's something that we have to think about because there's somebody to sign our permit kind of thing. Because rafting and recreation in this form is pretty low man on the totem pole. Like we're the last consideration. Like Ducks Unlimited, you guys have a big reach, so we kind of jump on your coattails sometimes for water conservation, but yeah, in the economy, like people don't when things are tough, that's kind of the first thing to go. So those are all things that we think about throughout the year, with water being the biggest thing. But yeah, anybody have any questions?
Is the wild and scenic river designation, is that why there's a lot less people allowed down? Okay, okay.
Yeah, and the numbers that the rafting companies can take hasn't changed since 1987. So we're taking the same amount of people for the last 40 some year, almost 40 years. And even though the recreational use and people, you know, blossom in numbers, but it does keep it much nicer. Yeah. Much quieter up there.
Yeah.
What do you think, I guess, maybe from your perspective, you and that other guiding company that have been around the longest?
Mhm.
What do you think has made you guys stick around versus the turnover in the other companies you were saying?
So prior to, prior to the probably 2010, that those were all the same owners. Prior to that, they started the company and then they just kind of aged out. Basically, they retired and sold it. And the one that has been there since the beginning, I'm surprised he hasn't sold it, but yeah, so I think it's just time. It's a great business, really fun. It's pretty intensive. Everybody's like, what do you do in the winter? You know, but that's what we do in the winter is how we get everybody there in the summer. You know, it doesn't just like happen. So but it's just isn't as intense in the summer, you know, it's 24 hours a day. And in the winter, it's a little quieter, but still, you know, a third of what we do in the summer, which is still a lot. So it's an interesting work schedule. A lot of people can't do it, but it's pretty fun for those of you that can.
Can you talk about the flooding and landslides and like how that impacts how many people you can, like, if the river
Oh, yeah.
really flows, you gonna make up for it later or?
No, so yeah, that is kind of devastating, you know, small businesses such as ourselves. So in 2012, we had the fires, so we were shut during the bulk of our season. And then in 2013, the flood came through and that specifically wiped out above Stowe Prairie. And that's like a third of the way down of our most popular trip. So we had to put in below it after we had been closed for a little bit. And then the same thing happened in 2020. So 2021, like July 21st, we had the big Black Canyon, Black Hollow fire. or flood. And we got a call in the middle of the night from our guides that were up there rafting. They're like, hey, there's a big flood. You need to get down here now. And we were full the next day. We were full the next for the next 2 weeks. So we had to cancel all of them at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they can't, and they're like, can we go tomorrow? But they can't. Like, once that 100-person day is over, it's over. So like that affects our like cancellation policies, and people get really mad, you know, if they're like, oh, I'm just not feeling it today, I'm not gonna show up. And we're like, well, if you don't get a refund, because we can't rebook that spot, and we just lose it, you know, so. But yeah, so we just lose out, which is a bummer. Like the fires last year, like really affected us because it was between here and Estes Park, so people couldn't get down. So we just gave them their money back, you know, and then it got to a point where they were like, oh, I'm just not feeling it today, I don't feel like it. So I want my money back. And we're like, well, okay, that was okay when there was an active fire, but that was 2 weeks ago. There's not an active fire anymore, so I'm sorry. And you're like, oh, you know, you put my family in danger, but you know, you just can't get back. So that's one of the downsides of having it so highly regulated.
I was gonna ask, if the flow, if you will be impacted at all by the Cooter Flows Initiative, if you're familiar with that?
Yeah.
If that will help to better regulate the flows?
Yes, so what we've been talking about with various, people that are high up in, you know, like Northern Water and like the initiative stuff. Basically, they'll call for more water and they'll pull it out below where we take out. Some other companies have the really, like the filter plant section that they run quite often. And that will affect them, so they'll take it out of that, but they won't take it out. They'll send it from above and they'll take it out below us. So it's actually better for us. Yeah, so we'll have more water that we can count on. And a lot of people just don't know how it works. Like the Hyatt people, like the Northern Water people, we were chatting with them on just like a side note a couple years ago, and we're like, hey, so if you don't shut off the water, they were trying to save it for like October or something, and they shut it off on like August 6th, and it was just puddles. I mean, we couldn't wrap. The other companies were a little bit lower down. And so they did, so we just called it, we closed on August 6th because it wasn't a quality trip. So we were telling him that, he's like, oh, I could have just waited 3 weeks to do that. And we we're like, that would be great. But people just don't think in terms of whitewater rafting, like it's not high on the priority list, but it's high on the enjoyment list. Like all of you, I see all of you like, oh, I've been rafting, or I remember rafting or something.
And I think Brad, maybe you also participated in Cooter runs the ribbon crew, is that right?
Brad does, yeah.
And I want to those types of conversations, like, does that help with?
Definitely. It just mostly helps with just networking and just understanding and acknowledging kind of the plight of recreationalists, you know?
Yeah.
So any of that being aware, so all of you guys being like, oh yeah, come on. So I guess if they do shut off the water in August 6th, and you still have a third of your season left, and then affect the families of the 70 employees you have and all that stuff, yeah.
Well, Peddler's fun.
Thank you.
So when you are ready to retire, are there buyers that you know are ready or looking, or do you have to like solicit folks? Like, how does that work?
Both. There's a lot, both things happen. There are a lot of people, we get contacted by a lot because it's a good life. It's good business and it's fun. We sell fun. But also, for the right person, it's tricky. So there's a lot of different things, but like those other 3 companies have turned over a couple times in the last couple of years. So whether it works or it doesn't, I don't know. Like we're not planning on selling anytime soon. So I don't know. I'll answer that across that bridge when it comes to it.
I'm sorry, I can't find this on your website. I know you're based in Fort Collins, and I think that's where everybody meets you at.
Mhm.
Where geographically are you putting in?
So like I said, we have several different trips that we do. The 2-day starts way, way, way high up in the canyon by Sportsman's Lodge. Do you guys know where that is? You guys? And then, but we haven't run that since 2020 because the, fires took out the whole ecosystem. And we just want to wait for that all to recover without having, a bunch of people a day. And then our bulk of our trips are full day, which starts at Dad Gulch. And that we can only take 25 people a day on that stretch. Just to keep it that, wilderness area. And then Stevens Gulch is our main trip and we go all the way down. We're the only ones that do but all of our half day stretches are continuous. So you put in lunch, you go all the way to the takeout, 12 or 8 miles away. But basically there. So they meet at our shop, which is Patter's Pub, which is by the big roundabout, north by Chappelle. And then we bus them up into the canyon from there.
Okay. And any other questions from Matt as well? Okay, well, thank you both again. Oh, okay, now we're gonna.
Oh, okay.
For you.
Thank you. It was really good. So proud of you.
So we were hearing kind of the recreation side, small business as well. Now we're gonna get more on the business side. And so we're gonna hear from two Erics, the tale of two Erics. And I think, Eric England, is he on? Okay.
I think my other Eric.
Oh, Eric England is in person. Okay.
Karen, what was her first name? Because she was here for Brad.
Lindsay.
Lindsay?
Yeah, Lindsay. Hey, Alex, who's going first?
That's what I was just saying.
Okay.
Do you want to go first? It's up to you. You want to do?
Okay,
So,
we're doing Eric Nielsen first. Okay, so we have online, he's not able to join us in person, but Eric Nielsen, who's the Associate General Counsel of Literate Foods, one of the largest dairy products companies in the world. His work focuses on resolving complex environmental, land use, real estate, construction, and other related legal issues for Literate. Prior to relocating to Colorado in 2014, he worked as an attorney for the US EPA, clerked for justice on the Vermont Supreme Court, and spent 2 years in a boutique regulatory firm in Vermont. And he has a BA from Rutgers and a JD from Boston University School of Law. And thank you, Eric, for joining us online. We've got to get you pulled up on the screen here.
hi, can you hear us, Eric?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. And we can see you too.
Great. So apologies that I can't be there in person. I'm kind of back to back here in Denver all day. So thank you for having me. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Give me 1 second. All right, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to make, can you make it full screen now or?
Yeah, let me. How's that?
Yes, great.
Great. Well, thanks for that intro. Obviously, I'm Eric Nielsen, Associate General Counsel at Literate. I've been at Literate for going on 8 years, and started initially as Literate first environmental counsel. My role has kind of morphed over the years, but heavily involved in all things water, all things environmental still, in addition to all the other stuff that's within my scope. Always excited to talk to this group. I think I've done a version of this presentation 4 or 5 times. And I think back, kind of a core memory, the first time I did this was March of 2020 at New Belgium Brewery. And it's a core memory because it was essentially the last thing I did before the world ended. We were all kind of in denial that COVID was a thing. And then basically the next day, I got an email saying, don't stay home. So fun. And now, of all things, I'm remote. So apologies for that. I'll try to be live for the next one. So anybody in the room, and feel free to jump in. I like to try to make this presentation as interactive as possible, but who here is familiar with Leprino? Anybody in the room heard of Leprino? I think I saw a couple hands. For those that haven't, does anybody in the room eat pizza? Anybody like pizza? Couple hands. So Leprino, for those that don't know, Leprino is the largest producer of mozzarella cheese in the world. And we are a leading producer of whey protein and other nutrition products, also the largest producer of lactose in the world. We supply, I'm not sure the exact number, but it's somewhere around 80% of all the pizza cheese sold in the United States. So if you've eaten pizza in your life, there's a very good chance that you've consumed our cheese. And I would be willing to bet that if you've eaten pizza, I'd be willing to bet that you have, in fact, consumed a Leprino product, whether you knew it or not. So global footprint, we've got 10 plants across the U.S. We've got 2 in the Central Valley of California, 3 in the Central Valley of California, 2 in Lemoore, 1 in Tracy, 1 in Roswell, New Mexico. We've got 2 manufacturing facilities right here in Colorado, 1 in Greeley, which up until very recently was our newest facility. We have a plant in Fort Morgan, and then our corporate headquarters are right here in Denver. We've got about 600 employees in Denver, as well as a large R&D facility and a pilot plant, which was essentially our first manufacturing facility. That's now a pilot plant and a research facility. Coming across the country, we go down to Texas. So Lubbock, we just built a new plant in Lubbock, and it just came online in January. And that plant approximately mimics the size of our Greeley plant. We take in about 8 million pounds of milk a day in Lubbock, and we do about the same in Greeley. And then Michigan, we've got 2 facilities, 1 in Remus, 1 in Allendale, which is just outside of Grand Rapids. And then all the way east, you'll see a dot on the New York-Pennsylvania state line. That's not an accident. So we have a plant in Waverly. Technically, it's in Waverly, New York. But the state line between Pennsylvania and New York actually runs right through the center of the plant, which as an attorney, makes for some very interesting legal questions. I'm not sure why we did that. If we could go back, I'd probably pick a side. So Leprino's international presence, we're not just a U.S. company. We are a very global company. We've got primarily sales offices across the Asian market. In Singapore, we've got a pretty large sales hub, China, Japan, South Korea. We own a company that has manufacturing assets in Brazil. And then in Europe, we have a number of manufacturing operations that date back to 2000. And up until recently, that was part of a joint venture with a company called Glambia. Glambia has since divested of all of its cheese assets. So now we are the sole owner of everything that we're doing in Europe and the UK. Our products are found in over 50 countries. I think that list has grown since I first put this presentation together. So why are we here? Why does Leprino care about water? Why is an attorney talking to you about a cheese company in the context of a water literate leaders presentation? The next few slides, and I've got a video coming up after this, we'll talk in a little bit of detail about water and the importance of water to Leprino. and what we do with that water, and where it all comes from. So it all starts with milk. Some of you might be aware that milk is approximately 87% water. Now, when you go to the store and you buy a bag of cheese, it's typically, you'll note, it's not typically wet. And that's because when we bring in milk, we separate out curds and whey, and your goal is to recover all of the solids from that milk. And then all the water, you got to do something with it. And so at our Greeley facility, for example, where we take in over 8 million pounds of milk a day, that's quite a bit of water that we capture. And we don't just get rid of it. We do, at all of our facilities, we have on-site storage for the water that we recover from milk. We call that water cow water or condensative whey. So we recover that water, we store it in silos, and then we use it within the facility as much to the extent possible, to the greatest extent possible. So we use it for cleaning, and then in some cases we treat it, put it back in silos, use it again for cleaning. We use it as much as possible, but at some point, you just take in so much milk and you separate out so much water that the water has to go somewhere. So at the end of the day, all that water ultimately is treated primarily at wastewater treatment plants that we own and operate at all of our facilities. And then that water is returned back to the environment in one way or another. And what that means in Colorado, that's going to be a different process than, for example, in California or in New Mexico. So in Colorado, we have direct discharge permits, so we treat all of that treated effluent to stream quality and discharge it, for example, in Greeley into the Poudre River. Out in California, we're primarily treating water at our wastewater treatment plant and discharging that water on farms where it's used for land application for growing crops. And I'll get into a little more of that later in my presentation. So this next slide, I've got a video which has been challenging in the past, but let me see if I can make this work. And feel free to just start raising havoc if you can't hear or see this. One second. There we go.
There's no sound.
No, it's that.
Lots of cheese there.
Yeah.
Sorry, you said there's no sound?
No.
Alex, I separately sent you a link with this video, and I'm wondering, it might be easier for you to just pull up that link and show it to the room, and then we can come back to the presentation.
Yeah, 1 second.
Sure.
Okay. Pulling it up, but you're gonna be hidden for a second.
Sure.
Headquartered in Denver, Colorado, today Leprino Foods is a world leader in the production of premium quality dairy foods and ingredients. We are the largest producer of mozzarella cheese in the world and a leading supplier of lactose and whey proteins. Our plant is one of the most technologically advanced and environmentally friendly cheese and dairy ingredient manufacturing facilities in the world. Let us show you how we do environmental leadership at Leprino Foods Greeley plant.
At Literate Foods, we look for processes and projects to increase water efficiency. We also look for creative ways to reduce the amount of fresh water we need from municipal sources, starting with the milk that comes into our plant. Cow's milk is about 87% water, and we recover most of this water at the end of the cheese making and whey processing stages. This unique reuse effort makes our plants net generators of water, meaning the water output from the facility exceeds the amount of fresh water we take in.
In 2017, we installed an anaerobic digester and a cogeneration engine.
The methane gas created in the digester process is expected to generate 6 megawatts of power a day. The desire to decrease greenhouse gas emissions led us to install a $22 million combined heat and power system known as CHP. Natural gas is cleaner burning than the coal used to produce electricity from the grid, so our carbon footprint decreased.
As our company continues to grow, we feel that our responsibility for maintaining positive and sustainable relationships with our neighbors and environment is critical. We will continue looking for opportunities for cleaner and more efficient technologies, in addition to striving every day to wisely use the resources that our communities afford us. At the end of the day, this stewardship is essential to maintain sustainable dairy communities and is vital to our future success as well.
Great, thanks for pulling that up. Are we back? Can you guys see the presentation again?
Yes.
Perfect. So yeah, just wanted to show that video. You know, obviously it touches on water and it touches on some of the other sustainability stuff that Leprino is doing, specifically in Greeley. And you know, those are just a few examples at just one of our plants, just to give you a sense of what we're doing as a company to be good stewards of the environment. So we touched briefly on milk, right? 87% of milk is water. And I think it's kind of a good segue into the concept of developed water doctrine in Colorado. So in practical terms, what that 87% means to Leprino, and for the environment, frankly, is that we actually discharge more water than we take in from municipal sources or at some of our facilities from wells, right? We are a net contributor of water to the environment. And so in Colorado, there's actually a law in Colorado water law does a really good job of recognizing water rights, priority in water rights, and the ability to utilize water courses to transport water. It is kind of a model. When I go and have to deal with water use issues in California, I'm always grateful that our headquarters, and we've got 2 facilities in Colorado, because of the very well established doctrines that exist in Colorado law. So, developed water doctrine, a lot of words on this page. What it means is, essentially, if someone develops water from a non-traditional source in Colorado, the developer has the right to use or sell that water and can utilize natural water courses in the state to transport that water. And what that means for Leprino, specifically at our Greeley facility, is that we actually have a decreed, and this is all public record, we've got a decreed water right acknowledged by the Colorado Water Court in the increment of water that we discharge to the Poudre River that's attributable to the milk that we take in and process. So that 87% that ultimately ends up as clean water in the river is actually a water right. And we worked very closely with the city of Greeley when we developed the facility to put that application together and ultimately see that water right through the Colorado Water Court. And we view it as a great win for us, a great win for the city, and ultimately a great win for the environment. And almost all of that water we actually license back to the city of Greeley for municipal purposes. The city can draw that increment of water out of the river and use it however it wants. So it's kind of a cycle of life story for the water increment of milk that comes through our facility in Greeley. And we're doing, at our Lubbock facility, we're actually doing something very similar, and it's modeled off of what we did in Greeley. And before I move on, any questions on that?
I have a question. How much of the milk that is going into the Greeley plant is coming from Colorado dairy?
Pretty much all of it. Almost all the milk that comes to our facilities comes from within 50 to 100 miles of the plant, just because of the perishable nature of milk.
Okay, so essentially you're just another stop on the, you know, the reuse of water, in the South Platte River Basin.
Yes, yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Megan,
What's the acre feet per year of that decree? Right? Your developed water,
It's about, the initial decreed right, I want to say was about 600 acre feet. But we're actually processing more milk than we initially contemplated. The throughput of that plant has grown quite a bit. So it's close, it's probably 700 or somewhere north of 700 acre feet.
thank you.
I have a question. So my question is, it's great what you're doing there at the actual facilities, with what you're getting back in water. Are you requiring any of the dairies which you're getting, the dairy milk from to have these same types of processes that you're doing to give back?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, we do work closely with, so our primary supplier is the Dairy Farmers of America, which is a big co-op, and we do work very closely with DFA on sustainability initiatives. And I am positive that DFA is working very closely with farmers on sustainability initiatives. And we've been looking at ways because the city is not quite licensing all of the water that's available for reuse. We are looking at opportunities to get some of this water back to farmers, to kind of complete the cycle. And so that is one of the things that's on the horizon for us. So if there are no more questions, and I could take additional questions at the end, I'll move on to the next slide so I don't run into Eric's time. So that's developed water doctrine. So other examples of water uses and conservation efforts. This one's pretty simple. It's kind of low-hanging fruit, but it has made a huge difference for us as a company. So water metering, going back to I want to say 2015, 2016, we started a comprehensive effort to install water meters throughout our facilities so that we could better understand where the water is going, right? What are the most water intensive uses in our facilities? And that allowed us to identify opportunities to reduce the amount of water needed for cleaning and other purposes within the facility. Again, pretty simple in theory, but initial capital costs of kind of adding water meters throughout the facility were pretty large. But then once you start to run the numbers on, well, you can reduce your water usage quite a bit by just paying attention to where it's going. It's kind of a no-brainer. And this has been a really good story for us from a sustainability perspective. Another project, and we've got a few of these around the country, but Lemoore, our facility in Lemoore is the largest facility we have in the network. It takes in about 11 million pounds of milk every day. And so because of the size and the scale of that facility and the amount of treated wastewater coming off the facility, this was a pretty big project for us. So what this is essentially we take out the wastewater that comes out of the plant, and it comes out pretty hot because we've got a lot of evaporation and oiling and steam and all kinds of stuff that creates heat within wastewater in our facility. We recover that heat. We've installed a wastewater heat recovery system, and then we use that heat to actually heat incoming water at the facility, which reduces our energy costs associated with heating the water in the first place. And back in, I want to say 2018, at Lemoore, this was estimated that it brought our energy costs down by about $700,000 a year. With energy costs in California today, this is probably closer to a $2 million a year savings just from using waste heat, basically, to heat incoming water. So lots of innovative stuff that I didn't even know existed before I worked at Literate. Other examples, I talked briefly about land applications. So this is our Roswell, New Mexico plant. You can kind of see here at the bottom of the frame. It kind of just above the plant and off to the right, you can see our wastewater treatment site. And then further up in the distance, you can see quite a bit of farmland. So in Roswell, there are no rivers that are convenient to the plant where we can just easily treat the water and send it back to the river. So what we do in Roswell is we treat the effluent that comes out of the plant, and then we land apply it on about 500 acres of farmland, and that the crops that are grown on that farmland are then typically sold back to dairy farmers in the area. So it kind of completes the cycle of life for water reuse, even within the dairy universe as it relates to that facility. So we're selling back crops to the very same dairy farmers that are supplying us with milk. And this is this obviously nothing about this is small, but at our Lemoore West facility and the Lemoore East facility, they combine the effluent from both of those facilities in California, and we do the same exact thing, except it's on a 2,600 acre ranch that's piped to that ranch, and then we have a contract farmer that does basically the exact same thing, except he's gotten pretty innovative with the types of crops that he can grow. He's not just growing for dairy farms; he's growing cotton. In some cases, he's growing tomatoes and other higher value crops, all with water that comes out of our facilities. And as I'm sure all of you know, water in the West is becoming more and more scarce and becoming more and more of a valuable resource. So particularly in the Central Valley of California, this is kind of a great story and a great opportunity for us. I'll briefly talk about this concept of zero water and what we think is on the horizon. So this is today, right? This is what we've talked a little bit about today. Right now, we take in our primary sources of water are our raw water supply, whether it's from a municipal source or well source. And then we also have, obviously, water that comes out of the milk. All that's used within our plant operations, and then it's treated and discharged for some beneficial use. Either it goes back in the river or it ends up on land for growing crops. So what's on the horizon for us, and we've started down this path in California, because there are some regulatory hurdles to make this work in the context of a regulated dairy processing facility. But where we'd like to get eventually is cut out the raw water supply altogether, and get to a point where we are just utilizing water from milk within our plant operations, and then to the extent possible, treating it, separating out, the portion of that water that cannot be reused within the facility, discharging it for beneficial reuse, and then actually looping back in that treated water back into the plant. And in California, we have made some progress, and we've gotten some initial regulatory approvals that would actually allow for us to take advantage of this zero water concept. At the end of the day, it comes down to cost, right? It becomes incredibly expensive to install an RO system that would allow us to treat the volume of water to the level required to bring it back in at a drinking water level that the USDA and the FDA would allow for in a milk processing environment. So we're still working through some of that, but as water resources become more scarce, particularly in the American West, we think that this is very likely to be approved and constructed and utilized probably sometime in the near future. So I hope in the next year, if I get invited back to speak to water literate leaders, I can tell a success story about one or more of our plants utilizing zero water or very low water within the plants. And I think that's the end of my presentation. Let me see if I can I'm happy to take any questions, and then I put my email address up here in case anybody, if you want to reach out to me separately, I'm happy to chat separately, but feel free to fire away if you've got any questions for me.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Do you ever foresee the highly consumptive use of water by cows as part of the equation for your company's, I don't know, net use of water? I understand it's probably separate coming from farmers, but I was just curious about that.
What was the first, do we ever, sorry, I missed the first part of that question.
Do you factor in the consumptive use of water by cows in any of your equations for your net water use? And do you see factoring that in the future?
We do. We've got we have an entire global responsibility team that is constantly looking at all of the inputs, and we've, as you can probably imagine, we have a number of customers that are also looking really closely at that from a, not just on the water use side, but also on the greenhouse gas side, the greenhouse gas accounting. We actually are working very closely with a company that uses worms to treat wastewater on farms and clean that water up. Not only do the worms reduce greenhouse gas emissions at the farm level, but they also create clean water on site. And so farmers view it as not just a greenhouse, the farmers to some extent care about the greenhouse gas emissions, but our customers care more about the greenhouse gas emissions we've learned than the farmers do. The farmers really care about the water and the clean water that's going to be coming out of those systems. So we are actively engaged in and looking at ways to basically, be as sustainable, not just for us as a company, but to extend that sustainability beyond us to the farm level, and then be able, because customers are demanding it, be able to present those wins to our customers. And, sustainability is it's not something we do because we have to do it. Sustainability is something we do because it almost always makes good financial sense, right? If you're not sustainable, eventually you will die. So you have to factor all of that in. And yeah, we're definitely factoring in consumptive water use, greenhouse gas emissions, and all the other impacts at the farm level. Those are huge for us.
I have a question. In your other plants, do you see the same, is anywhere else besides the Front Range of Colorado, do you see the same level of pressure on water resources coming from population growth and just, water scarcity? And then kind of related to that, do you, because of that demand for development and increasing, turnover of ag lands to municipal use. Not that I don't love Greeley. Greeley's got a lot of water. Do you consider partnering with other municipalities to provide that water source to quickly growing municipalities that otherwise are competing for that ag water with your dairy farmers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In our network, I think the Front Range of Colorado is unique in the demand for water and the competition of resources for water. So Lubbock, for example, Lubbock is it exists on top of the Ogallala Aquifer, right? The Ogallala Aquifer is by all accounts a depleting water resource. And that was a huge consideration when we were looking at developing a new facility in Lubbock, Texas, because of our experiences in Greeley, our experiences in Fort Morgan, our experiences in California. But what, the experience in Texas has been, particularly in the Lubbock area, there are not, 50, 60 communities competing for water resources. You've got a few large cities in West Texas. You've got Amarillo, Lubbock, and then you've got some smaller communities. And the competition is not the population competition is not nearly as strong as it is for water use in Texas as it is in Colorado, for example. Same thing in New Mexico. Roswell, New Mexico, not a very large city. We got, I want to say about 50,000 people there. There's not a ton of other communities in the area that are increasing population growth to the extent that it's competing for water resources. So I think the situation in Colorado is fairly unique in that regard. And, you know, I think quite a bit of that is driven by the way water rights have been set up in the state of Colorado. And I think, you know, as I mentioned, Colorado's done a really good job of establishing a very solid system of water rights. You go out to the Central Valley of California where, you know, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is only a few years old. And the prior to that, basically farmers would just pump groundwater and deplete groundwater resources to the detriment of all their neighbors, to the extent that it literally caused subsidence in some areas by over 19, 20, 30 feet. And you know, that lack of regulation, that lack of a solid system of water rights has caused these issues that we're seeing in the Central Valley of California. So that's kind of a long-winded way of me saying, I think Colorado, particularly where our plants are located, Colorado is definitely unique in the competition for water resources from a growing population versus where most of our other plants are located. We've got a lot of ag land and, you know, a sustainably growing population of one or two cities versus tons of municipalities competing against each other for water rights alongside farmers.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thanks so much.
Thank you all. Really appreciate your time and thanks for having me. Always happy to speak to this group. As I mentioned, feel free to reach out by email if you guys have any follow-up questions.
Perfect, thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you all.
All right, we're going to hear next from England, who is the Water Operations Manager at Occidental Petroleum Company. He's a native Coloradan and works on all things water related to company's operations in the Rockies, including activities for construction, drilling, hydraulic fracturing, production, disposal, and recycle. He spent his career working in agriculture, municipal